The sound of splintering wood jolted me from my evening reading. My cabin door crashed inward, hanging at an impossible angle from its remaining hinge. Through the doorway charged Beverly Pembroke, president of the Pine Ridge HOA, wielding a laminated document like a weapon. "Citizens arrest!" she shrieked, her voice cutting through the peaceful mountain air. "By the authority vested in me by the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association bylaws, Section 12-4-B, I hereby detain you for repeated violations." I barely had time to set down my coffee before she stormed into my living room, her sensible shoes tracking mud across my hardwood floors. What Beverly hadn't noticed in her righteous fury was my houseguest sitting calmly in the wingback chair by the fireplace. Judge Patricia Holloway slowly lowered her reading glasses and turned to face the intruder. Still wearing her black judicial robes from an earlier ceremony, she possessed the kind of presence that could silence a courtroom with a single glance. She set down her cup of chamomile tea with deliberate precision. "Well," Judge Holloway said in a tone that could freeze magma, "this is certainly an interesting interpretation of citizen's arrest. Would you like me to explain the actual legal definition of breaking and entering, or shall we skip straight to discussing the federal charges you've just earned yourself?" Beverly's face went from triumphant red to ghostly white in approximately 2 seconds. The laminated paper slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the floor like a dying butterfly. "Let me back up and explain how I ended up with an HOA president destroying my property while accidentally committing multiple felonies in front of a sitting judge. My name is Daniel Morrison, and 6 months ago, I thought buying a cabin in Pine Ridge would be my ticket to peaceful retirement. After 30 years as a software engineer in the city, all I wanted was to write mystery novels and watch the seasons change for my deck. The real estate agent had mentioned something about an HOA, but I figured how bad could it be in a mountain community of weekend cabins? I learned the answer to that question exactly 3 days after moving in, when Beverly Pembroke appeared at my door with a measuring tape and a clipboard. She introduced herself as the HOA president with the kind of self-importance usually reserved for heads of state. "Your mailbox is 2 inches too tall," she announced, as if revealing evidence of international espionage. "According to Pine Ridge standards, all mailboxes must be exactly 42 inches from ground level. Yours measures 44.25 inches. I thought she was joking. She was not joking. The official violation notice arrived the next day, complete with a $75 fine and a compliance deadline of 72 hours. That was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, Beverly found violations everywhere she looked. My deck stain was insufficiently rustic. My bird feeder attracted non-approved wildlife species. My wind chimes created auditory disruption after 6 p.m. Each violation came with fines, and each fine came with Beverly's smug satisfaction. I tried reasoning with her. I attended HOA meetings where she presided like a tiny dictator, shooting down every attempt at discussion with references to obscure bylaws that seemed to multiply weekly. Other residents whispered their own horror stories but were too intimidated to speak up publicly. The situation escalated when I installed solar panels on my roof. Beverly declared them an architectural atrocity and demanded their immediate removal. When I pointed out that state law protected solar installations, she simply created a new bylaw requiring aesthetic approval for all energy devices. Things got personal when she started photographing my property daily. I would see her lurking at the edge of my driveway with her phone, documenting every imagined transgression. She filed complaints about my compost bin, my rain barrel, even the way I stacked my firewood. The fines piled up to over $3,000. Then Judge Holloway decided to visit. Patricia had been my late wife's college roommate, and she'd promised to check on me during her vacation to the mountains. She arrived Friday evening for what was supposed to be a quiet weekend of catching up and hiking. Beverly must have seen the judge's car in my driveway. By Saturday morning, a new violation notice appeared, citing me for operating an unlicensed lodging establishment. The fine was $500 per night, per guest. "This is harassment," Patricia said, reading the notice over breakfast. "She can't fine you for having house guests." "She seems to think she can do whatever she wants," I replied, pouring more coffee. "Last month she fined Tom Garrett $200 because his grandson's bicycle was the wrong shade of blue." Patricia's expression grew thoughtful. "I think I'll extend my visit a few more days, if you don't mind." This situation intrigues me from a legal standpoint. That evening, we were settling in for a quiet night when Beverly made her dramatic entrance. I'd been reading in my recliner while Patricia reviewed legal briefs by the fire, still in her robes from a ceremony she'd attended earlier that day. HOA Security Force. Beverly had shouted from outside, moments before destroying my door. Daniel Morrison, you are under citizen's arrest for willful violation of community standards. She'd clearly been building up to this moment for months. The document she carried was an absurd masterpiece of pseudo-legal language, granting her emergency enforcement powers in cases of persistent non-compliance. She'd even fashioned a badge from an HOA logo and a lanyard. Now, standing in my living room with wood splinters scattered around her feet, Beverly faced the uncomfortable reality of her situation. Judge Holloway rose from her chair with the gravity of someone about to deliver a life sentence. "Mrs. Pembroke, is it?" the judge asked, though we all knew she already knew the answer. "I need you to understand the severity of what you've just done. Breaking and entering is a felony. Attempted false imprisonment is a felony. Impersonating law enforcement is a crime. Destruction of property over $1,000 is a felony in this state." "But I'm the HOA president," Beverly sputtered, her authoritative facade crumbling. "I have the right to enforce community standards. Section 12-4-B clearly states, your HOA bylaws don't supersede state and federal law," Judge Holloway interrupted. "What they do is provide excellent evidence of premeditation." She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the actual authorities now." Beverly's eyes darted between us like a trapped animal. "You can't do this. I'll have you both expelled from Pine Ridge. I'll put liens on your property. You'll wait quietly for the police to arrive," the judge said firmly. "Daniel, do you have a camera? We should document the damage before anything gets disturbed." I grabbed my phone and began photographing everything, including the broken door, the scattered wood fragments, and Beverly's homemade security badge. The judge narrated each photo with clinical precision, creating an audio record of the scene. The sheriff's deputies arrived within 15 minutes. Beverly tried to explain her HOA authority to them, producing a binder of bylaws and violation notices. The officers listened politely before informing her she was under arrest for breaking and entering, destruction of property, and attempted false imprisonment. "This is ridiculous," Beverly protested as they handcuffed her. "I'm a respected member of this community. I serve on 3 committees. My husband is a dentist." "That's nice, ma'am," one deputy replied. "You still can't break down people's doors." As they led her away, Beverly turned back to glare at me. "This isn't over, Morrison. The HOA will hear about this. You'll be blacklisted from every committee." Judge Holloway waited until the police car disappeared before allowing herself a small smile. "Well, that was certainly more exciting than my usual vacation activities." "I'm sorry you got dragged into this," I said, surveying the damage to my entrance. "Don't be sorry. This is the most interesting case of HOA overreach I've seen in 20 years on the bench. I'll be fascinated to see how she tries to defend this in court." Word of Beverly's arrest spread through Pine Ridge like wildfire. By Sunday morning, neighbors I'd barely spoken to were stopping by to share their own stories of HOA harassment. Tom Garrett brought coffee cake and revealed that Beverly had tried to fine him for having the wrong species of grass in his yard. Sarah Chen from 2 cabins over admitted that Beverly had measured the height of her garden gnomes with a ruler. An emergency HOA meeting was called for Monday evening. The community center was packed, with standing room only. Beverly's vice president, a nervous accountant named Harold Finch, attempted to call the meeting to order. "Given the, current circumstances," Harold stammered, "we need to address the leadership situation and review our recent enforcement actions." What followed was 3 hours of cathartic venting. Residents produced boxes of violation notices, photographs of Beverly trespassing on their property, and documentation of thousands of dollars in arbitrary fines. It turned out she'd been using HOA funds to pay for a private investigator to surveil residents she didn't like. The vote to remove Beverly from the board was unanimous, except for Beverly herself, who participated via speakerphone from jail and voted against her own removal. The vote to refund all fines from the past year passed immediately after. The vote to dissolve the HOA entirely failed by only 2 votes, with most people agreeing we needed some organization, just not Beverly's version of it. Judge Holloway attended the meeting as my guest, taking notes with obvious interest. Several residents approached her afterward, asking if they had grounds for harassment lawsuits. She diplomatically suggested they consult with local attorneys but made it clear that Beverly's actions had crossed numerous legal lines. The criminal case moved swiftly. Beverly's lawyer tried to argue that she believed she had legitimate authority as HOA president, but the prosecutor pointed out that no rational person could believe that HOA bylaws permitted breaking down doors or making citizens' arrests. The security camera footage from my cabin showed Beverly approaching with bolt cutters and a crowbar, tools she'd brought specifically to break in. The fake badge and arrest document demonstrated premeditation. Her history of harassment established a pattern of escalating behavior. Judge Holloway had recused herself from the case, naturally, but she attended the trial as a witness. Her testimony was devastating. She described Beverly's complete disconnect from legal reality and her dangerous conflation of limited civil authority with law enforcement powers. Beverly took the stand in her own defense, which proved to be a mistake. She insisted she had done nothing wrong and that her actions were necessary to maintain property values. When the prosecutor asked if she believed HOA rules superseded state law, she answered yes without hesitation. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts: breaking and entering, felony destruction of property, attempted false imprisonment, and impersonating a law enforcement officer. At sentencing, Beverly's lawyer pleaded for leniency, citing her lack of prior criminal history and her contributions to the community. Several character witnesses testified that she had simply been overzealous in her duties. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Rebecca Torres, was unmoved. "Mrs. Pembroke, you terrorized an entire community under the guise of maintaining standards. You violated people's privacy, harassed them at their homes, and ultimately committed serious crimes because someone dared to have a houseguest. Your complete lack of remorse is troubling." She sentenced Beverly to 18 months in prison, 3 years of probation, and ordered her to pay $25,000 in restitution for the door and legal fees. Beverly's jaw dropped as the sentence was read. She turned to her lawyer, whispering frantically, but there was nothing to be done. The bailiff led her away as she kept repeating, "But I was protecting property values."